Today I want to share with you how to make golden broth. It's a vegetarian option to replace chicken broth. Hi sweet friends, I'm Mary and welcome to Mary's Nest, where I teach traditional cooking skills for making nutrient-dense foods like bone broth, ferment, sourdough, and more. So if you enjoy learning about those things, consider subscribing to my channel. And don't forget to click on the little notification bell below. That'll let you know every time I upload a new video. Well, I've received emails and comments from many of you who have shared with me that you're vegetarians and you've enjoyed making ferments and sourdough and some of the other recipes that I share, but you've been looking for a substitute that could replace bone broth in many recipes where bone broth is called for. So today I want to share a recipe with you called golden broth, and it's a wonderful substitute whenever chicken broth or chicken bone broth is called for in a recipe. You can easily substitute this golden broth and get that rich, wonderful flavor that's normally associated with a nice chicken broth or a chicken bone broth. Now this is a very basic recipe, and the reason that I like to keep this very basic is that it makes this golden broth very versatile. But you can definitely add additional spices or herbs to meet whatever taste that you would like. Now we'll go over the ingredients, but you don't need to write anything down. If you open the description under this video, you'll see the word recipe, and next to it will be a link. If you click on that, it'll take you over to my website, same name as my YouTube channel, Mary's Nest, and you can read the recipe online or you can print it out. And I want to mention that this recipe is based on a recipe from the New Laurel's Kitchen. And this is a wonderful book by Laurel Robertson. And this is an old book. It's been out for years. And actually, the New Laurel's Kitchen was a revised version of her original cookbook that I believe came out in the 70s, just called Laurel's Kitchen. But if you have the New Laurel's Kitchen and you're a vegetarian, I think that you'll be very pleased with some of the recipes that you can find in here, because she's got some very clever things, and I think that they can be very helpful in your meal planning. Now the first thing you're going to want to start with is a yellow onion. Yes, you can use a white onion, but a yellow onion helps with a little bit of a richer flavor, and the skin, which we're going to use, helps add to the color of the broth. Now this isn't an exact science, so if you have two small yellow onions or a large yellow onion, it's all going to work out fine. Next, I like to add 1 garlic clove. You can certainly add more if you want, or you can leave it out. Next, you're going to want a half a teaspoon of turmeric. This is going to help with the color, and the nice thing about turmeric is that it's an anti-inflammatory, so it definitely helps tamp down inflammation in the body. And scientists tell us the more we can do to tamp down inflammation in our body, the healthier we'll be. The next thing that you're going to need are 2 tablespoons of some type of fat. What I've got here is olive oil. Now, if you're a lacto-ovo vegetarian, the type that takes milk and eggs, or just a lacto vegetarian, just the milk, you can definitely use butter or ghee. You can also use coconut oil, but you do need to be a little careful with that, in that some coconut oils have a stronger flavor than others, and so you don't want it to impart a particularly strong flavor to your golden broth, because you want to try to keep this relatively mild so it can be very versatile to be used in all types of recipes, and also so that it's very pleasing to the palate, somewhat similar to a chicken broth or a chicken bone broth. In the original recipe in the New Laurel's Kitchen cookbook, she calls for yellow split peas, and those are definitely very easy to find at the grocery store, and you can definitely use those. But what I've got here is yellow mung dal, and it basically looks like it's the mung bean, and it's been split here, and it basically looks like a small yellow split pea. And the reason that I like to use this is that this is very easy to digest. So if you have any problems with digestion, look for this. And this is actually becoming pretty common if you have a little international section in your grocery store. And you can also find this at Indian grocery stores, and it would be called like yellow mung dal or yellow mung bean, something like that. And this works exceptionally well in this recipe. But again, if you don't have this, yellow split peas will work fine too. And something that I want to share, which I think is very clever, that Laurel shares in her cookbook, is that if you, instead of a golden broth, you want to make a green broth, which you can certainly do, and that would be wonderful being used in any sort of vegetable soups or soups where you're incorporating a lot of greens. And what she does is she makes the golden broth into a green broth by using green split peas, which are very easy to find. And so I thought I wanted to share that with you if you want to have two types of broth that you're working with, a golden broth and a green broth, and both very nutritious. Now I want to mention, if you use the yellow mung dal to make this broth, you can also use that in another recipe called khichdi, and it makes a delicious porridge that is very healing to the digestive system. And I'll be sure to link to that recipe in the iCards and in the description below underneath this video. The next thing that you're going to need is 8 cups or 2 quarts of water. And 2 quarts or 8 cups is just a little bit less than a liter, but you can certainly use a liter if that's how you're measuring. You don't have to worry about being perfect and exact. This is a very versatile recipe. A little more water, a little less water, it's not going to matter. The first thing we're going to do is dice up our onion, and we are going to include the skins so you don't have to peel it. It makes it nice and easy. Now you don't need to worry about being precise. As you can see, this is just a very rough chop, and the onion skins are mixed right in there. And next we're going to do the same thing with the garlic, and we're also going to keep the skin on. See, it makes the whole job here is very easy. And the nice thing about keeping the garlic skin on as well as keeping the onion skin on, not only does the onion skin add color, onion skins and garlic skins contain a lot of vitamins and minerals, not unlike the actual flesh underneath the skin. So that's why when you're making a broth and you want to maximize the nutrition in your broth, adding the skins to from the onions and the garlic boosts that nutrition. I'm just going to smash that garlic clove just to make it a little easier to chop up. But again, not an exact science, and I'm just going to slice it, and that's it. And I'm just going to add that into its own little pile. We're just going to set that aside for now. Now I want to mention, you may notice that an ingredient missing is salt. And I don't add any salt when I make golden broth. You certainly can, but I think it's better to keep it salt-free, and then when you use it in a recipe, you don't have to worry about trying to adjust the salt in the recipe because you're using a salted broth. This way you've got an unsalted broth. It's a nice plain palette that can take on all types of flavors. Plus, if you're using sea salt in your diet, and you want to really maximize all the benefits that sea salt offers, by adding the salt when you go to eat the broth, say you're just eating it plain, you maximize the nutrients in the salt by not damaging them by the heat. Now I'm going to bring you over to my stove. We're going to warm the olive oil, and then we're going to saute the onions. Well, I sauteed the onions on medium-low heat for about 10 minutes until they were a beautiful golden color. Now we're going to go ahead and add in the garlic and just saute that with the onion for about a minute or two. You'll know it's done being sauteed once you really start to smell the garlic aroma. And then at that point, we're going to go ahead and add in our turmeric and spin everything around, twirl everything around very well to make sure everything's the onions and the garlic are thoroughly coated with the turmeric. Well, the onions, the garlic, and the turmeric have all cooked up beautifully now. It really only took a minute or two with the garlic to start smelling very fragrant, and then I added in the turmeric, and I just cooked it with the garlic and the onions for about another minute or so, and I'm doing this on a low to medium-low heat. Now we're going to head over to the sink, and I'm going to give my yellow mung dal, a little bit of a rinse here. You can do the same if you're using yellow split peas. Then we'll head back over to the stove and add these to our saucepan and mix them very well with the onions and the garlic and the turmeric to make sure that the dal, or if you're using split peas, are very well coated. I added the yellow mung dal into the saucepan, stirred it very well with the onions and the garlic and the turmeric, and then I went ahead and added in our 8 cups or 2 quarts of water and brought everything up to a boil. And once the entire mixture came up to a good strong rolling boil, I put the lid on the saucepan and I turned everything down to the lowest setting on my stove. Now we're going to let the golden broth simmer for 30 minutes. Well, I let this golden broth simmer on the stove on low for about 30 minutes and it looks glorious. Now, you have 2 options as to what you want to do next. The first option is to strain off the solids and use the broth as is in whatever recipe you want. The broth will stay fresh in your refrigerator for about 3 to 4 days, and if you want, you can also freeze it, and it'll stay fresh frozen in your freezer without freezer burn for about 2 to 3 months. Now, if you choose this first option, don't throw out the solids. Save them. You can add them to your scrap bag in the freezer and then throw them in the next time you make a vegetable broth. If you make bone broth, you can do the same. You can throw them in when you make your bone broth. And the reason is they still have nutrition in them, so there's no reason to discard them. The second option is that you can puree this whole thing. You can either use one of those stick blenders or you can transfer it to a blender in batches and puree everything to the point where you have a creamy broth. And that creamy broth can be eaten as is, or you can use it as a base for making creamy soups. And when you save the solids, don't worry about the fact that you've got some split peas in there or the mung dal like we used here today, because that all adds nutrition to whatever recipe that you add them to in the future, whether it's a vegetable broth or a bone broth. And the reason is that we only simmered this for 30 minutes. So, as I mentioned, I really believe everything still has some nutrition in it. Now, can you simmer this for more than 30 minutes? Definitely. But I find at 30 minutes, it just has a lovely flavor that's mild enough to be used in a variety of recipes. The longer you simmer this, the stronger and more intense the flavor becomes. But for today, we'll strain out our solids and we'll just see this lovely, in essence, mock chicken broth that we have. I think you're going to be so pleased with this. The aroma is just heavenly. Well, I've got a bowl here. I put in a little bit of sea salt, and I'm just going to ladle some of this broth into the bowl, and we'll give it a taste. Well, let's give this a taste. Nice and hot. That's delicious. And the flavor is so similar to chicken broth. I think you're going to be surprised, pleasantly surprised, and delighted to use this in any of your vegetarian recipes. Now, if you'd like more recipes for different types of broth that are also vegetarian, like a super mineral broth, be sure to click on this video over here. And I'll see you over there in my Texas Hill Country Kitchen. Love and God bless.